Welcome to The Hidden Stranger, a short story by David Jones. In this gripping tale of conspiracy and survival, a woman alone in a remote home faces a life-changing decision when a mysterious figure appears in her barn, and the truth challenges everything she thought she knew. This AI-narrated audiobook is best experienced on 2B Acting's InView as a selective interactive video, where you can control playback and navigate key moments. Also available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon. Disclaimer: this is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual people, places, or events is purely coincidental. Now, settle in and prepare for The Hidden Stranger by David Jones.
Chapter 1: It's Hard to Smile. His eyes never once connected with mine. Instead, they flitted from the exposed bum cheeks of the two teenage girls using the self-service checkout tills opposite, to the eyes of his serving colleague occupying the only other manned checkout in the busy supermarket. Scanning the shopping he automatically took from my basket and roughly deposited on the counter in front of me, he generated a musical rhythm that appeared to make the world around him invisible. Well, perhaps not the world, as the extremely short pants, they called schlongs, worn by the girls were clearly visible to him. The unsightly fashion of schlongs, in my opinion, had spread like wildfire. The shorts looked like standard shorts at the front but were basically thongs at the back. Undergarments when wearing these ridiculous coverings were optional, but from the political storm generated by councils insisting that decency laws had to be complied with when wearing them in public spaces, it was a clear indication that schlongs with nothing underneath were more the rule than the exception. Diverting my gaze to the bottoms of the seemingly unaware girls, I could perhaps understand why my server was quietly salivating. Being young seemed such a long time ago, when you took for granted the youthful shine and suppleness of skin. Cosmetic surgeons have perfected many age-defying techniques. But still, they have not discovered a way of giving us older folks back the skin that shouts beauty you can spend all day admiring. The anti-aging cream that landed on the counter at that moment made me smile at the irony. I could drown myself in the lotion and, schlongs or no schlongs, I'm sure my server would never have the same look of lust for my skin. A look of disgust perhaps, but never will the creams generate the want that the girls' bare backsides brought on so effortlessly. Purposely, I shifted to the side, blocking my server's view just as one of the girls bent to pick up her now full shopping bag. The disappointment in missing the expected climax showed on his face, along with an annoyance slightly concealed in his voice when he announced the cost of my shopping. Despite my spoiling antics, I still remained invisible to him. Glancing quickly at the approval display, which lit up in response to the waving payment card, he nodded, then quickly returned his attention to searching the crowd for the rear of the girls. Unable to find them, his eyes instead settled on yet another pair of schlongs, this time belonging to a young, tall, leggy blonde. His words, "Have a nice day," were wasted, as he hadn't noticed that I was no longer there. It sounds crazy, but on my walk to the car, anger took hold. The contents of the shopping bags spilled as I roughly threw them onto the rear seat before slamming the car door shut. I sat breathing hard, looking at the vast car park, full of other shoppers, and noticed that not one of them noticed me. At 6 years of age, in the eyes of the world, I was invisible. Invisible because they saw me as old. After 10 months of listening to advice on what it takes to maintain the perception of youth, for some reason today, at this moment, a feeling of futility hit with force. An overwhelming urge to ram my car into the line of nose-to-nose traffic advancing to the exit came from nowhere, and before I could get a grip, I did exactly that. The pandemonium that followed was inevitable, yet unexpected, and only served to confirm the age prejudice that led to the rebelliousness of my action. As my car had advanced on the parked row, a space suddenly developed, instantly filled by a quick-footed young man. He was full of apology when I stepped out of the vehicle, even though the dent in the side wing of his car was my fault. Surrounded by a crowd that came from nowhere, followed by the authorities, the story was told, how the irresponsible young man pushed his car in front of this poor old lady, giving her no chance to stop. 30 minutes later, I drove away with little damage, leaving the unfortunate recipient of my frustration facing a reckless driving charge. The drive home took longer than normal as more time was spent thinking. Parking on the drive, with the intention of emptying the car of its shopping, I instead went straight to the kitchen. Having opened the window, the cool breeze eased its way into the space, calming the furrows of my brow, doing what the cooling coffee that sat on the table in front of me had not. Once again, the sound of the ringing phone almost stirred my limbs into action to answer, but before nerve impulses could be translated into movement, the sound stopped, causing only a slight interruption to the thoughts that continued to bother me. Apparently, everyone experiences stages of grief in their lives, especially with the loss of a close one. John was my close one. We were married for just over 30 years, and for him I would have moved the world. The time we spent together was magical. Why did he have to die? For the last 10 years since his death, this one question has played on my mind. According to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in her 1969 book on death and dying, there are 5 stages of grief. Denial. For at least the first 2 years, I would not allow anyone to touch anything belonging to John. The house, his clothes, even his favorite chair remained sat on. I would talk to shadows of him, knowing that every word said reached his ears. He had not left. Jody hated every minute of living with a ghost as a father. I looked at the empty space that his chair, until only recently, occupied and sighed. Dr. Kingsley would be livid to find me sitting here doing exactly what he has spent the last months telling me not to do. Look forward, Josephine. Never back. Promise me you will look forward. I did promise, anger. This took hold after an unpleasant confrontation with Jody's teacher just prior to major exams. You're neglecting your daughter with your obsession over your dead husband, she had said. She started her critique of my parenting skills with the words, I hope you don't mind me saying. The harsh lashing of tongue she received gave her the answer. From that moment, a feeling of hatred for everything descended. My anger was directed at inanimate objects, complete strangers, friends, and family. In the few months it lasted, I drove everyone away. The pain the harness of my words caused them was to show, in a small way, how it felt for me every day. Filled with guilt for being angry only made it worse. I even hated myself. Bargaining. It was the 5th year when I entered what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross referred to as the bargaining stage. For Jody's sake, the struggle to control myself raged daily. To rationalize my every action. To pretend I was a capable human being able to function like normal. My hands shook, I would trip over things, drop things, and forget things. Jody would have to rely on others to bring her home from school, as so many times I left her waiting for a mother that was constantly trying to figure out how to be okay. Acceptance, which is normally the final stage, came when Jody suddenly announced she was to be married. I hadn't noticed she had reached the age of 20. That my little girl was now a woman. That she had found a life. I also hadn't noticed she was pregnant. We have a granddaughter on the way, I whispered to John's ghost before I finally accepted that he was no longer here. For almost a year, I became the support my daughter needed. Jody was so pleased. Depression. You may not think it is possible to be depressed for 4 years, but it is. Internally, I felt numb. It's hard to smile when you are depressed, and despite Jody's efforts, my face remained without a smile for years. The trigger of the depression stage was the death of Max, a German shepherd that accompanied John around the farm and never left my side since he went away. Max was the last piece of my dead husband that I had held onto, and when he died, so did I. The opening latch of the door made me turn. A very irate Jody entered. Why aren't you answering the phone? And what's happened to your car? When I told her I had a small accident, it was like pouring petrol on burning embers as the flames of her wrath exploded. Since taking charge of my recovery, Jody has assumed the role of mother, but a very nagging one. I am definitely seen as behaving younger than her 5-year-old and treated accordingly. As I made her a cup of coffee, I let her admonishments flow in and quickly out of my ears. Why didn't you call me? I didn't want you to worry. Mum, you have to stop this. Until you're better, you have to let me help. I will next time. Next time. You shouldn't be driving. This time I'm really taking your keys. She did take them when I remembered I'd left the shopping in the car. Yet another sign of mental instability, she thought, as she shook her head. Why were you ringing? It's not Wednesday. Wednesday was the allotted phone call day, where Jody spent a good 2 hours sharing her world. This was linked with a visit every other Sunday when her daughter Alexandra wasn't with her father. Why they had divorced I was never told, but I was pleased that he still took care of Jody and her little one. There was also the odd drop-in when her shift allowed, to clean up on Monday evenings. A stickler for routine since the treatment started, she had put our relationship back to where it was before the depression took me and I zoned out, as she called it. Haven't you heard the news? What news? 30 terrorists escaped this morning. They jumped off the train at the main station. Videos of the town are all over the internet. It was easy to tune out her words. John hated terrorists. Our basic freedoms were constantly being eroded to counter their audacious behaviors. We wanted nothing to do with them, and I don't know why Jody felt I now cared enough for her to call around. The sound of the television she clicked on changed constantly until she found the news channel. They've caught most of them, but there are a few still missing. You've got to be careful, Mum out here alone. We didn't have to wait long before the headlines she tuned in to see appeared. I sat and watched as she pointed out the familiar shape of our central railway station and the fact that slightly outside of the picture we were looking at was the hotel where she worked. The more disturbing image of policemen in full riot gear beating the life out of the men who were quickly recaptured did not register. Her generation seems immune to the infliction of violence on those society singles out for mistreatment. If they were animals being beaten in the same way, there would have been a public outcry. How times have changed. Can you turn that off? Don't you want to hear if they caught them all? Reluctantly, she switched off the television. We looked at each other. Words at the moment were not needed. Her arms wrapped themselves around me in a deep hug. Be careful, Mum. I will. Are you taking your tablets? Yes. Kissing the top of my head, Jody picked up her bag along with my car keys. We'll shop together at the weekend. Just call if you need anything. She finally left. I listened to the engine of her car fade as it exited the long drive. It was nice to have the house return to silence. Darkness had descended. Turning on the lamp by my reading chair, I picked up the book started 3 weeks earlier. The book opened at the marked page. I sat and once again broke my promise to Dr. Kingsley. As in between reading the words on the page, I again allowed my mind to ramble through the past, until uncalled-for sleep took hold. The bang that woke me was loud. Startled, it took a few moments to adjust. Once again, the chair had annoyingly become a resting place. The last time it happened, I suffered for at least 3 days with really bad backaches. Looking around in the dark that filled the space beyond the glow of the small reading lamp, I desperately tried to guess the source of the noise. Was it inside or out? As though answering my question, the sound came again, this time even louder. It came from the barn outside. Someone, or something, had got in. In all the years living in the house, I never had cause to be afraid. Our neighborhood has always been a safe place. Alarms were fitted around the house for insurance reasons, so I never felt unprotected, yet this noise was disturbing. My ears strained to hear anything, to justify a reason for the rising panic I felt. For what felt like an age, I sat in the gloom listening. Nothing. Chapter 2: The Barn. Silence is hard to ignore. After straining to see any movement in the yard through the kitchen window, I gave up, but the annoying silence still played on my mind as I prepared for bed. Now the absence of Max was evident. That dog would have identified the sound. He would now be barking uncontrollably, his protective stance ready to battle if he judged the perpetrator of the noise a threat. Max hated other animals, especially foxes, which took delight in toying with him on the brief occasion we kept chickens. The nightly commotion proved too much as they relentlessly tried to get at the poultry, failing every time with Max on guard. With the chickens gone, a night's sleep was possible. But not for Max, who remained forever vigilant on the doorstep where he insisted on spending his nights. Perhaps I should have replaced him, as Jody suggested. That, however, was never a possibility, but at this moment, I really could have done with the sharpness of his ears. Just as my right knee touched the mattress of the bed, I heard the sound again. Curiosity drove the actions that followed, leading legs down the stairs and out the back door, flashlight in hand. I've called the police. I shouted and listened to see if the lie would lead to a reaction. Silhouetted by the dim moonlight, the barn was just an outline as it sat a distance from where I stood. How silly I felt. Standing in a floral-patterned nightgown, waving a flashlight around in the dark. A rational person should be on the phone calling the police. Retracing my steps, I decided to take the more normal approach and reached for the phone. What would I say? I've heard a noise outside and I think it's coming from the barn. How stupid would I look if it turned out to be nothing? Another episode for them to chalk up to old age. Jody would have a field day with this if the sound proved to be a figment. It's just a noise to be investigated. If this is what it takes to live alone, then fortitude had to be found. Armed with the woodchip axe and flashlight, I pushed open the back door and descended the steps. Reaching the bottom step, it hit me that slippers were perhaps not the most appropriate footwear for nocturnal investigating across a yard. Looking at the half-moonlit barn, then back at the door, the decision to change footwear evaporated when something flashed past. Moving the torch around did little, as it only found darkness. I could hear myself breathing. I was scared, walking, first quickly, then more slowly, towards the looming barn. The answer to what to do if it was an animal remained elusive. When Max fought his battles with the foxes, on one occasion I did go to his aid. It didn't give any pleasure when a log I threw landed on one of his challengers. They scamper away rather quickly when they see you have the upper hand. With this memory in mind, I stepped more boldly. The movement seen earlier stood frozen in the light beam of the torch. Why would the damn foxes come back? There is nothing here for them. I had the rubbish bins moved to the end of the drive so this would never happen. Camouflaged by stillness, its eyes did not waver from mine. Surprisingly, my stillness mimicked the creature, as we played a game of Mexican standoff. Inside, unbeknown to my adversary, a feeling of calm caused my lungs to finally react normally, calming down so that the freshness of the night air finally registered, taking away the panic that previously accompanied every step towards the grassy bank where I now stood. Somehow the change in demeanor was translated into a chance, for in the blink of an eye, the fox bolted. The light caught the white fur of its tail, confirming entrance into the barn through a hole I didn't know was there. Could they really be living in the barn again? This was not acceptable. An immediate reaction was to have them removed first thing in the morning, but on turning to go, I remembered it was illegal to disturb their habitat, wherever that was judged to be. Experience from previous years recalled the piles of paperwork that would need to be filed to move them on. The stars above sparkled, each shimmer reflecting the decisions dancing internally, which finally resolved into action. The decision was, they had to go tonight. Pushing as gently as possible, nothing could be done to stop the creaking as the barn door yawned slowly open. Blackness filled the barn. The night was dark, but the interior of the space was twice that. Fingers searched for the light switch that familiarity knew was there. But nothing happened when turned on. Another moment of uncertainty. How many foxes were there? Gripping the handle of the small axe, the light beam pushed its way into the void as I stepped forward, a noise to the left. I turned left. A sound to the right. I swung right. A breaking sound underfoot. I froze. The torch confirmed I'd stepped onto broken glass from the light bulb above. It was fortunate that the soles of the slippers were hard enough to prevent the shards from piercing my feet. That said, I wondered how foxes could have smashed the bulb. This train of thought didn't last long as like lightning, one, then two foxes dashed around and through my legs. Any chance of showing bravery was lost with me screaming and jumping around in an attempt to exit the barn as fast as possible. An upturned bucket found my feet, transforming the dance movements into falling motion, cascading my frail bones into wooden pallets, then onto the hard, cold ground. As the breath expelled from my body, I saw the hurried tails of foxes leaving the way I came. Flat on my back, with nightgown almost covering my head, a smile formed. Max would have been proud. I chased them off all by myself. Eventually, the damp of the floor forced movement to limbs. Struggling to a sitting position, the palms of my hands came together to wipe away the dust, and surprisingly, they felt wet. Recovering the torch, its illumination made me stand up. The palms of my hands were red. Had I cut myself on the glass? The torch revealed a bloody trail that could not have come from me. Was that why the foxes were here? Did they have a kill dragged here to devour? The trail went further into the barn's interior. Despite a rising nervousness, the steps forward following the bloody trail had to be taken. Squeezing the handle of the axe, I was ready in case the animal I would no doubt encounter was injured rather than dead. Animals are at their most vicious when wounded, especially when cornered. The idea of ending the wounded creature's life was saddening, but it would be wrong to leave it suffering. Boxes obscured the path of the blood. It looked like they'd been placed in the way as an obstacle. Could an animal do that? The boxes came just above head height. Using the lower box that stuck out as a step, gingerly I balanced on tiptoe to shine the beam into the channel the boxes made to the wall. Peering into the space, I screamed. The brightest blue of human eyes looked back at me, causing me to topple back with a fear I'd never previously experienced. I fell along with the boxes, which fortunately felt empty. This time I didn't stay motionless for long. Seeing the blue eyes move to where I lay stirred a flight instinct, making getting out of the barn an extremely high priority. Still screaming, I remembered the axe in my hand and threw it toward the eyes. Not waiting to see if it landed, a quick scramble backward on the floor gave time to get me to my feet, then into a run. The space between the barn and the house appeared stretched, seeming never-ending. Each step towards safety had me looking behind with the feeling the owner of the eyes was in full pursuit. On the other side of the bolted back door, the shaking would not stop. When it did, it was instantly replaced with a wave of nausea that propelled aching limbs to grip the end of the sink and empty the little contents of my stomach. Cold water splashed, then throbbing, then another splash, then less throb, then a final splash, and the world started to regain composure. It was only minutes since leaving the barn. Standing in the dark, the realization of how vulnerable I was gave rise to renewed panic. Moving through the house at speed, every lock on windows and doors was checked, then rechecked. The television was switched on at loud volume to give the impression of others occupying the premises. With all lights switched on to provide maximum illumination, I took comfort from there being no hidden shadows for anyone to hide in. With each exhale, the steam from my hot breath fogged the window out of which I now stared relentlessly. The barn door remained wide open. The light from the torch, dropped in the haste back to sanctuary, shone mockingly towards where I stood. The last of the terrorists has been recaptured. Words from the television registered. Adjusting my position to see both the barn and the set, I watched with growing disturbance the sight of well-armed policemen dragging their captured into vans surrounded by the good townsfolk, some of whom I'm sure Jody would have delighted in identifying if she were here. The last man struggled as he was pulled by one arm along the ground, another policeman kicking him repeatedly until he went as limp as a rag doll before being flung unceremoniously into the van with the others. Applauding, the relief on the crowd's face was caught on the panning camera. Only one woman in the crowd found the gumption to object to the harsh treatment being displayed. That is, until an applauding citizen shoved her from behind. As she sprawled on the ground, an armed policeman reached her and further delighted the crowd when his boot connected with the woman's jaw. Smiling with perfect teeth, the face of the beautiful news reporter once again filled the screen. She introduced a well-groomed politician who reassured the public that there was never any real danger, as the suspected terrorists that had sought their freedom had not yet been confirmed as such. They were en route to be processed. Pulling my eyes away from the set, full concentration returned to the barn. There was still no change. The phone in my hand felt heavy, as again the urge to use it went against rational thought. If it was a terrorist hiding out there, could I allow such violence to happen here to provide me with a peaceful night's sleep? With the alarm set, the doors locked, the phone at the ready, wasn't I safe enough? And then, didn't the report say they'd caught all the terrorists? That means the barn's occupant may just be a down-on-their-luck vagrant, but so what? My barn was not a place of refuge. I don't want foxes using it, and I definitely don't want vagrants. Sliding the bolt on the back door open, courage with a tinge of anger made me step outside. I've called the police. Standing halfway between the barn and the house, the wind took another lie. You have about 10 minutes before they get here. So I suggest you leave now. Not knowing if I could be heard, I took a few more steps toward the barn and shouted again. Without warning, the light from the torch in the barn suddenly went out. This night was one of exercise, as before the light dimmed fully, I was already screaming and running back to the house. Chapter 3, Time to Go. Face propped against the glass was not the most comfortable position, but a hardened resolve kept tired eyes fixed on the wooden structure outside. Hours had passed, and I only hoped that the barn's visitor had found another way to leave besides the main entrance, making the vigilance unnecessary. Light from the room obscured the image outside and instead reflected my own tired, creased face. Without realizing it, the night's adventure paled into insignificance against the thought that I'd not been moisturizing enough. Part of the recovery regime agreed with Dr. Kingsley was self-improvement. Feeling good about life, he said, starts when you feel good about yourself. Psychiatry had been tried previously but failed due to lack of any serious commitment. Jodie fought hard to make the sessions started with the good doctor a more meaningful pursuit of happiness. To this end, therefore, I followed the advice, and body image improvement became a routine, for which moisturizing daily factored highly. Many hours had been spent finding the right creams to revitalize skin left to deteriorate after many years of neglect. Fingers pressed themselves into the surface of lines that marked my face, rubbing first gently then vigorously until the process was no longer pleasant or comfortable. I had to stop this, but the fingers doing the rubbing were no longer my own. Whose were they? To my horror, the reflection in the window now contained the blue eyes. The occupant of the barn stood behind me. How? It didn't matter. Fingers were locked around my neck, making it difficult to breathe. Grabbing the tightening digits did little as the pressure increased. Struggling proved ineffective as air to the windpipe became less and less. Screaming, impossible. Tears ran fast down skin that would forever remain badly moisturized. All that was left was one last struggle. One last lunge. Using all the effort that could be mustered, I pushed first back then forward, resulting in a falling motion. The chair beneath me collapsed, waking me from the dream. Rays of sunshine from the early morning sun speckled the kitchen wall. How long had I been sleeping? Rising slowly, the confused state of mind made me question if there was or wasn't cause for concern. In between periodic stops to peer at the barn from every window, a change of clothes took place, preparing me for what I was now ready to do. I made the overdue call to the police. Have you been burgled? No. There is someone in the barn. Has your property been damaged? No. Can you just send someone to check the barn? Are you hurt or injured? No. I think there is someone hiding in my barn. Do you need an ambulance to attend? Abusing any official of the law is an offense even if that abuse is by phone call, the idiot I was talking to happily stated in the patronizing tone used throughout our not too brief conversation. Almost 2 hours passed since returning the receiver, without any sign of the promised patrol car arriving. This was too much. A limit had been reached and so, without hesitation, I swung open the back door and marched to the barn. In the coolness of the morning, the fear from the previous night had been replaced with a strong determination to reclaim my property with or without police aid. Anger with the ineffectiveness of the police emboldened the strides taken to reach the open barn door, lending a gravity to the words spoken. If you are in there, you'd better come out now. In the light of day, the interior looked a mess. It was evident that a bin, normally at the end of the drive, had been dragged in and its contents strewn all over the floor. The chicken carcass left from Sunday's dinner was perhaps the reason why last night the foxes returned. The blood trail was evident, ending once again at the boxes, which had been rearranged but this time did not make the height of its previous tower. I want you to come out now. A shovel found its way into my hands. Without further hesitation, a quick advance was made to the boxes on which the swinging tool landed. Much to my surprise, the boxes easily flew across the barn. The shovel was raised again, poised for the next strike, when the hidden body rolled into view revealing the bloody heap of a young man. He looked as young as my daughter. His long black hair was matted with blood. The sleeves from the elbow down on his left arm were drenched in blood. He was covered in bruises. The picture was that of a badly abused dog that had been kicked around for days. The raspy breathing from his bloody nostrils confirmed life. Standing with the shovel still hovering high above my head, the thought of putting the animal out of its misery came to mind. As if reading the harshness of my thoughts, the young man's eyes flicked open. They were bluer than last night, but this time there was no way anyone could fear the sadness they contained. It was all I could do to back away from the blooded heap out into the warming morning air. Obviously, the man needed serious medical attention, but why did he not go to a hospital? Pacing the length of the barn's exterior did little to solve the predicament of the moment. Do nothing and wait for the police to arrive, or give the man whatever assistance he needed to leave. Even after 20 years away from the profession, making the sick better was habitual. I'd noticed from the cracked lips that it must have been days since the young man had a drink. The paleness of skin indicated heavy blood loss. It would not be long before his body went into shock, leading to other complications. The raided bins meant he desperately needed sustenance, an essential component for any recovery, which clearly he'd not found in sufficient amounts. On returning, he'd moved from the position I'd found him, but not by much. The grimace on his face showed the effort it had taken for him to prop himself up to rest against the wall. Wary of the approach gingerly being taken toward him, his blue eyes showed there was no danger. In fact, quite the opposite, they seemed to be welcoming. Despite the visibility of the extensive pain on his face, his handsome features could not be denied. In his case, however, the beauty did not stop at the surface. There was something about his whole persona that attracted attention. Gazing for too long left you mesmerized. I looked away intentionally. The police are on the way. Clearly, these words were not welcomed. As fear registered immediately, causing him to use the little strength he had to withdraw behind the boxes that hadn't been knocked away. It's okay. They're not here yet. If you let me, I'll help you so you can leave before they arrive. It is difficult to describe what passed between us as we stared at each other. His look of abject dejection tugged heavily on emotional buttons never before pushed. In that moment, I would have given anything to protect the strange man from harm. An irrational fear came from nowhere. What if the police came now? There was a need to move quickly if my offer of help was to be genuine. Let me have a look at you. Inspecting him revealed injuries of concern. The left leg was badly broken in 2 places. An inch-long deep gash below the elbow on his left arm had been tightly wrapped with a dirty rag. His left shoulder was dislocated. Above his right eye, another deep wound. I remembered the thrown axe and wondered if this head wound was the result. There was guilt, then concern. Where was the axe? Perhaps he could read minds, as his gaze directed mine to the corner of the compound where the axe, torch, and one of my slippers formed a small collection. It looked bad, but to be safe, I collected the weapon before continuing the medical inspection. There were many bruises, along with the worst injury, a wooden stake protruding from his side. A fence post, perhaps. The congealed blood made it hard to see how deep it went. Not removing it had saved his life, so it was clear life was important to him. The blood had to be stopped, but I knew there would be little I could do until the wood was out. That would require medical facilities, and I tried not to let the gravity of this last diagnosis show on my face. I have a medical box. It's a good one. Well equipped. A slow nod showed understanding. Rising from the blood-stained body, the walk out of the barn halted as I turned to see his attempt at hiding was less than effective. Piling the boxes with bits of old machinery around him took little time. I had constructed something akin to a false wall, which from any angle looked solid. For reasons I could not fathom, as I looked back at the seemingly empty space, I felt much better. Returning as quickly as possible, I removed one of the carefully placed boxes, allowing entrance to the rear of the makeshift den, and crawled into the space. I couldn't believe that a few hours earlier I would have happily killed the man I was about to help. We fought briefly to prevent him drowning himself, as gulps of water cascaded over his face and poured down the front of his shirt. Sip slowly. Breathing in between more gulps, a smile appeared, signaling the next step in treatment. His blue eyes literally shone when the cold chicken touched his lips. As he ripped through the flesh of his meal, I used it as a distraction to tend to his wounds. Securing the broken leg using the inflatable splint from the medical box, the administering went relatively well. There was obvious pain when the auto-inflator of the splint reached alignment pressure, but the coolness of the gel inside the inflated appendage was clearly working. I'd given time for the little morphine I'd administered to take effect. The space did not allow us much room. Before realizing, I was sitting astride the stranger with the blue eyes. For a brief minute, both he and I wondered what I was trying to do. I hope you like lap dances. It was all I could think to say as I yanked back on his shoulder, at the same time pushing his arm back into its socket. He winced heavily but made no sound. I sat astride him longer than necessary, watching him recover. This was not right. Urges for intimacy had, years ago, left my loins. Looking good was one thing, but Dr. Kingsley would be shocked at my thoughts of rough-riding a man a third my age. Hastily, positions were changed. I carefully stitched wounds and applied bandages, leaving just the perpetually bleeding wooden stake. The damp rags packed around it were sodden wet. He knew what I knew. I'm sorry, but you have to go to hospital for this. His fingertips stretched to reach the small whiskey bottle, kept for emergencies, that accompanied the medical kit. On this occasion, antiseptic was its purpose, but inside or outside, its function, I suppose, proved the same. Watching the liquid drip from his chin, as his doctor and nurse, objection should have been the order of the day, but the calm it brought to his bruised, grimaced face was worth any error in letting him continue consuming drops of the unhealthy substance. Tipping water on wads of cotton wool, the white surface instantly turned a dark shade of grey as, gently, I wiped the sweat that collected on his brow. What's your name? Reading the change his face made, I knew an answer would not be forthcoming. Why would his name matter? Wasn't the condition for the aid being provided that he leave as soon as possible? What good would his name be unless to give it to the authorities? How did you get here? Another silly question that again received no answer. Why did it matter how he arrived? More pressing was how he would leave. I'm sorry. I'm nervous. Forgive me. The generosity of forgiveness showed in his enlarged pupils, letting fluttering butterflies loose inside the pit of my stomach. Why were my emotions exploding, uncontrolled, in this way? With the last swig of whiskey puffing his cheeks, what followed was alarming. In a blur, his working right hand, without pause, plucked the wood from his side. Blood splattered both our faces. With reflex action of old, my hands immediately covered the gaping hole. For a few seconds, I looked at his face and watched the lids of his eyes flutter to a close. His body slumped sideways. He was out cold, and I had no idea how to save his life.
Thank you for listening to this sample of the audio book. You can listen to the full audio book when you join InView, or you can buy the book from the Amazon store. This recording is copyrighted, 2B Acting Limited, all rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic or mechanical, including photocopy, recording, or any information storage and retrieving system, or performed without permission in writing from 2B Acting Limited.